I'm a teacher in Minnesota. I'm doing this very low tech. I'm just wanting to point out a few things that I see, consequently do something like an apologia for Christianity. I want to talk just briefly about literature, myth, interpretation of these stories. Seems to be a great deal of misunderstanding, probably due to a lack of good teaching about how we as human beings think about literature and about mythology and about stories. When we go to tell a story, we have different levels or types of story. We have, of course, the small joke or anecdote. We've got the larger narrative story. We've got the folk tale, and we have larger works like a novel, for instance. And then we have even larger stories than that, the myth that we use as a culture. Mythology is probably the greatest of all the stories that we tell. So what are we doing in these various stories? Well, they serve different functions, of course. But one of the primary functions that any story seems to employ or to accomplish is that it makes a sense of our experience as human beings. Joseph Campbell is very good at pointing this out in The Power of Myth, that what we're doing when we tell these stories is that we are making sense of the world around us. We're not only interpreting what we go through, we are also trying to understand what we might go through as well. The various stages that a human being experiences are not isolated to the individual. Humans from as far back as Neolithic times have gone through the same stages as humans now in downtown New York. The stages of being born and youth and then adulthood, and then the sexual maturity and the experience of terror and of loneliness and heartbreak, and the sense of happiness as well as a sense of sorrow and loss. So as humans, we've always experienced these things. But if we go through these experiences, we oftentimes feel like we're isolated, like we are cut off from everybody else. So how do we understand these stories? One way that we go to understand our experience is that we create an image to embody that experience. We can't convey to another person the direct experience we've gone through. Try, for instance, to express to somebody else the first time you fell in love and the elation and the joy that was involved, and make that experience just as vivid and powerful to the person hearing the story as it was for you. There's no way to do it. We can't convey that kind of power to somebody else, and so oftentimes our experiences are isolated experiences. We feel freakish or out of place about what we have gone through. What the story does, what the images that we use do, they allow us a third way, a way of being able to express to somebody else, I've gone through this thing. It works something like this. I and another person read the same story, and I say to the other person, this part of the story affected me deeply. And the other person says, yes, that part of the story affected me deeply too. And I say, well, I think this is what this part of the story means. And he says, well, that's what I think it means too. And all of a sudden I realize that I and the other person are traveling on the same route. We are not distant people traveling on different routes, and I'm not freakish in what I'm going through. Other human beings have gone through the same thing. So that the story that we have thus both come to allows us to travel on the same length. This is what apparently happens in the image of Oedipus. He meets his father at that crossroads where three roads meet, and he would, in an ideal sense, he would travel along with the older form of his own self along that path. But Oedipus, of course, kills that father that he meets at the crossroads rather than traveling along with him. But the story or the image is that third way, that third path by which we can travel down to understand our experience. How does that work? Well, all stories rely on images and imagery, and when we use an image, we have one of two types of images that we can employ. There's the natural symbol and the conventional symbol. The conventional symbol is a symbol or image that the society as a whole agrees upon, and it's not necessarily focused upon, or it's not necessarily connected to the thing it's trying to represent. The conventional symbol is something where I say, let's make this represent that, and everybody says, yes, that's a good idea, and so we agree to it. But there's no connection between the actual symbol and what it's representing. They're rather disparate. So for instance, an example of this, for instance, would be the McDonald symbol. There's no connection between the red and yellow sign and the milkshakes and the burgers that we eat. They are unrelated. A similar example would be, for instance, our alphabet. There's no real connection, at least anymore, between the symbol for the sound A and the sound itself, A. There is no connection between those two things. Nor is there any connection really between the word cat and that furry little creature that eats sardines and runs around clawing the furniture. They're not related except for the fact that we both agree that C-A-T are the letters that are going to represent the sound, and that the sound and letters are going to represent that creature. Consequently, there's a disjunction between, in conventional symbol, there's a disjunction between the word that we're using, or the image we're using, and the actual thing. Moreover, the society at large, when it fades, will lose the image or symbol. Natural symbol is slightly different. Natural symbol, by its very nature, embodies what it attempts to convey. So in the thing itself, there will be elements that anybody will know about, regardless of culture or time frame. Everybody knows, for instance, that water is wet. We all know that water is life-giving, but we also know that water is dangerous, it's life-taking. If we've been near a large body of water, we know it's deep and dark and mysterious, and we know that it can be powerful. We also know the water is beautiful. We know that it cleanses us and nourishes us, that it can be cool, that it can take different forms. All those things are part of the nature of water, and that has nothing to do with culture at all. When I want to go and represent something, for instance, that is mysterious and powerful and dark and wonderful, water becomes a very excellent example, an excellent thing to embody that. And so what I do is I take water and I employ it in the story, and it means all these different things regardless of the culture, and it represents some concept that I want to get across. That's why, for instance, in baptism, we use water and not peanut butter. Peanut butter is very different from water, and we would have a different effect if we use peanut butter rather than water. But in conventional symbol and natural symbol, both are employed in the construction of stories in order to convey an idea or theme or purpose. Angel.